Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I did a story a couple days ago about a waitress who was accused of changing the tip amount on her receipts that her customers had been given, and that she's now facing criminal charges. And oddly, a waitress popped up again in the news, but this is a different kind of story. Several people sent it to me. From the Miami Herald, diners leave a $4,400 tip, then the server is fired. Now, Mike Stunson wrote the story for the Miami Herald. It happened in Arkansas. But a server received a $4,400 tip by a $100 dinner club, and then she was fired. And now the restaurant's in Arkansas, and the dinner club is a group of people who got together and decided, before we go into this restaurant and do this, we're going to have a meal, and at the end of the meal, every single person in this group is going to pitch in $100 in order to give it to the server. And that's just our good deed for the time. The concept of the club was for each diner to leave a $100 tip as a way to pay it forward, as they say. Grant Wise is the man whose company hosted a real estate conference in Arkansas. He orchestrated the act as he and others dined at a restaurant in Bentonville. He said, "We knew servers really hit hard through COVID, and it was something that a friend had come up with to help give back." He spoke to several news organizations about this. He told one that he called the restaurant before they dined and checked on what their tipping policy was. Then one of their two servers was in tears when he informed her of their act after the meal. Diners in the group, as well as others who contributed money online, all chipped in, and the amount they gave her totaled $4,400. It's a lot of money. So one person who filmed the interaction as they gave this money to the server said it was wonderful to give back. "I've been humbled to have been part of something so beautiful and generous to bless someone else without previously knowing them." The tip, however, led to issues with the server's restaurant. She said restaurant management asked her to share the $4,400 tip with all of her coworkers, and she said she'd never been asked to do that before. Apparently, they gave her the money outside of the restaurant. They stepped outside, they gave her the money. But when she was asked to share the money with her coworkers, she declined, and for that, she was fired. They fired her. They said they fired her because she violated policy by telling the man about the idea of pooling the tips. She said it was devastating. "I borrowed a significant amount of money for student loans. Most of them are turned off because of the pandemic, but they're turning back on in January. That's a harsh reality." Meanwhile, the man who said that he's trying to do a nice thing here said he was saddened when he learned that she'd been fired from her job. He has started a GoFundMe to help cover her expenses. "I don't fully understand why this would happen to what seems like such a sweet and kind-hearted woman," he said. "Nonetheless, I'm committed to showing her that there are great people in the world that will do good when they can." So the restaurant, as you might imagine, was then flooded with negative reviews on Google and Yelp after reportedly firing the waitress. The restaurant also appeared to have temporarily disabled its Facebook account. In a statement to KNWA, the restaurant said it fully honored the group's request that the tip be given to the two servers, but it did not offer an additional comment. The man who was behind all this said in an update on the GoFundMe that the waitress was offered a job at another restaurant and, in fact, began to work there on December 8th. Now, it mentions two servers at the end, and it's a little unclear from the story exactly how that plays out, because it sounds like $4,400 went to the one server, and then when she refused to share it, she got fired. If there was another server involved, I don't know what happened to them. If they agreed to share their tip or not, or I don't know. But the bigger question here is, why was she fired? And I've spoken to people who work in the food industry, and I've never worked in a restaurant. It's one of the few places I've never worked. I know nothing about restaurants except that I eat in them from time to time. So I've known a couple people, but not a lot. But I do know there are restaurants where there are ways that some of the tips are pooled and distributed among some of the other people there. And it depends on the restaurant and their policies and so on. But they go on the theory that, hey, look, the waitress or waiter is the face of the restaurant to the customer, right? Someone walks in, patron sits down, orders a meal. Waiter or waitress comes over and talks to them, goes back, brings the food, comes back, checks, everything okay, great, brings the bill, boom, 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 boom. But while that's all happening, the interface between the waiter and the patron, there's all kinds of stuff going on back here that is just as important. I mean, the people who are cooking the food, the people who are mixing the drinks. And so there are restaurants I've heard of that have a policy that say that the tips have got to be pooled on some level in some way. Whether that's right or wrong, it all depends on whether or not you've been told that up front, and whether or not it's being applied consistently, and whether it allows you to make a living, because, as you know, wait staff is often paid a really, really low, below minimum wage, and the thinking is, well, tips will make up for that. Well, if they've got to split the tips with people, will they still make up for that? I don't know. That's the question. But here, where someone walks into the restaurant, and this is the plan. We're going to have a meal. After the meal, we're going to take the server and give the server this big tip, and just as a way of paying it forward, holiday season, who knows? And for the restaurant to say, oh, by the way, we now expect you to share that with everyone. If they didn't have the policy before, that, as you would guess, in my opinion, would be nonsense. If they had the policy before, and this waiter is lying about that, well, that'd be a problem. But keep in mind that the people who are giving the money aren't intending it to be split up and shared. And if you're at a restaurant that does split up and share the tips, well, I can see the point. But it's almost like this is not a tip, it's more of a gift. It's more of a gift. And I should be allowed to give somebody a gift. And for someone to say, oh, by the way, if you give a gift like this, you've got, they've got to share the gift with all these other people. That's different, because my gift should be based on what my intentions are, and I am the one who's giving the gift to somebody else, and they're getting the gift. And if someone interferes with that and says, no, you've got to share that gift because we've got this wacky rule, then I think that's a problem. But it's a crazy story, but it sounds like it ended well. But the woman did get fired because she didn't want to share the $4,400 tip she got with her coworkers after her boss told her she was supposed to, which she claims that she'd never heard of before. So there's a bunch of weird stuff happening here. There was a GoFundMe page set up, but she has got another job. So it sounds like she's okay, but the headline, when you look at the basic fact here, is that the diners left a $4,400 tip, and then she got fired as a result of what flowed from that. Not necessarily the direct result of, but it was all related. So story happened in Arkansas. The Miami Herald reported it. Mike Stunson wrote it. And Joshua, Keith, Jason, and nobody sent it to me. I get most emails are signed by people. Once in a while, someone will send me an email, and they'll have a wacky signature, or they won't have any signature at all. And so Joshua, I took his name off his email address because it looks like that's the first name that's part of an email address. But this is like nobody such and such at Gmail, and it wasn't signed, so I don't know who the person was. So, by the way, if you care and you send me an email with a story idea, sign it or at least indicate how you'd like me to acknowledge you, because otherwise I got to do this. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. How can you tell if you've been bitten by an alligator or a crocodile? One will see you later, the other after a while.